so much. I'm Jonathan Hall, head of policy research at Uber, which basically means that I study Uber's impact on the world, how it helps its riders, its drivers, and the cities in which it operates. So before we start, what is Uber? Uber is an information platform that connects drivers and riders in real time. It knows where riders are, and it knows where drivers are, and it gives them the opportunity to work together. It's simply an information company or software technology company. And I'll give you a brief description of how it works for those of you who have not used Uber. Both riders and drivers have the Uber app. They open their telephone. They tell the software tells Uber where each rider is, where each driver is, and estimates how long it will take for a driver to meet a rider. The software then allocates the closest driver to a rider who's indicated that he wants a ride. And then at the end of the trip, the software calculates the fare automatically, and an electronic payment is automatically processed. So it's kind of a magical experience if you haven't done it. You press a button, and a car comes, and you get in the car, and then you get out, and you don't pay, and there's no cash involved. You get out of the car. Uber handles all of the transactional frictions. So here again is how it works, as illustrated. You open the app and you see available cars in the area. You request a ride. The car comes. You enjoy the ride, and then at the end you rate the driver, and the driver rates the rider. This last step, the rating step, is a critical step in how Uber is able to use data to improve what has been a somewhat problematic transaction throughout the history of the automobile, which is that if you hail a driver, you don't know who the driver is, and the driver doesn't know who you are. So this little step called rating, which I'll discuss in a little more detail, is actually a critical piece of Uber's information and a critical piece of how Uber helps improve transportation. So what's so great about using software in this way to combine riders and drivers? The answer is, most importantly, that it enhances safety. So, as I said, Uber is an information company. It allows drivers and riders to identify themselves. They're not anonymous. So, if a rider does something bad, or if a driver does something bad, Uber is able to track what happened. If the driver takes a route that is inconveniently long, there's a receipt that the rider receives. They see that route, they can complain to Uber, and Uber can adjudicate the dispute. Uber facilitates electronic payments. So cash is not involved in transactions. Again, this is information-based value. The app is able to connect the rider's payment information to the driver's payment information and transact without cash. And GPS tracking allows for Uber to say in real time where people are, and after the fact where they went. The software also enhances convenience. So Uber vehicles are not hailed in person. Rather, they're hailed through the app, which sends information to Uber, which sends information to drivers. As a result, for example, if it's raining outside, you don't have to go down to the street to request a car. You request from indoors, and a private driver will come to where your location is. For drivers, this is advantageous because they can stop and wait in a place that's easy to stop and wait in. They do not need to scan the street and congest busy roads. I'll talk about that in a little bit as well. So what feels like a simple experience when you use the Uber app actually relies critically on a huge amount of data infrastructure and technology, only a tiny bit of which is Uber's. It requires that people have access to smartphone technology. It requires good mapping to be available and easy to use in the software. And it requires connectivity. Cabs typically circle looking for riders by line of sight. But with the technology that Uber has, it's able to centralize information and spread it more efficiently, so that, for example, as you can see in this little diagram, if the car is hidden or if the rider is hidden, Uber is still able to allocate the closest available vehicle. One of the things that this enables Uber's driver partners to do is spend less time looking around for riders and using the streets that should ideally be used to get people from where they are to where they want to be. So we think that this technology has great hope for reducing congestion, especially on busy streets. So that's the basic introduction to what Uber is. Now I'm going to introduce to you a little bit about what is peer-to-peer or P2P. Because with Uber's technology, it is much easier to become a for-hire driver. And so we have a model called P2P, which connects anybody who has a car to anybody who needs a ride. It's really as simple as that. So because it's so easy to become a driver in the P2P model, more people can become drivers, and they can become drivers very part-time. I'll skip ahead to the next slide just to show you what I mean. The hours that people work on Uber in the P2P model vary tremendously. So this graph shows you different people working different hours per week. Many Uber drivers on P2P drive for less than 10 hours a week, for example. One of the advantages of a flexible supply of drivers is that the supply can be responsive to shocks to demand and supply, or demand rather. So if it's raining, or if a large event ends, suddenly a large supply of drivers who are aware of that fact can come on as part-time providers of rides. And then similarly, driver partners get to work the hours that they want to work. The flexibility allows them to meet their personal needs and earn additional income. And I'll tell you a little bit about what the drivers have told us about their engagement with our software. One of the things that we've noticed that's particularly interesting in this P2P model is that individual drivers engage with the system in a different way each week. So this graph shows you on the far left and the far right, 21% and 22% use the app 50% less or 50% more than they did the last week. So week to week, this is an opportunity that people take up and let go, and we consider that one of the main advantages to the platform from the driver partner perspective. So we recently conducted a survey of our P2P driver partners in Bogota, and we found some pretty interesting things. So, for example, many of them, 40% are under 35 years old. 65% have graduated college. And then perhaps most interestingly, more than half use Uber as a secondary source of income. So the Uber platform allows you to log onto the app with almost no effort and earn additional income whenever is convenient for you or whenever lots of people need rides and the income level is high. 83% of UberX partners have 3 or more people in their household, which we think is additional evidence that people use this earning opportunity as a way to enhance their income to attend to their household needs. And the driver income numbers in Bogota, as throughout the world, are impressive and growing. So in this graph, we show you total monthly driver partner earnings, both for Uber Black, which is not a P2P product, and then the more recently introduced UberX. As you can see, the P2P product is growing very, very quickly. I think roughly half of rides now are done via P2P, and the revenues per month are significant, over $1 million American in the last month that we measured. So now I'm going to talk about what I really like to talk about, which is what's the impact of Uber on cities. So some of you may recognize this city. This is San Francisco, Uber's original city. But this is not a map. This is actually just a set of Uber drop-offs over the course of a day in San Francisco. So each little dot is one Uber drop-off. So the scale is impressive. But I think what's actually even more interesting is that while up in the top right you have the financial district, and it's quite dark. There are lots and lots of rides there. All of the more suburban neighborhoods on the left are traced out. Every single day, Uber drop-offs occur in all of these neighborhoods. The entire city is covered. Here's a somewhat similar map from New York City. In red, you have the first trip or the sign-up location of each rider from 2013. And then as you move towards dark green, you get more recent. And so what this is showing is that while at the beginning Uber riders were centered around the big business districts in New York City, mostly lower Manhattan, over time the number of people who are using the app in outer areas has increased and increased and increased, and the trend is unmistakable that as Uber has grown, access for hire vehicles in outer neighborhoods in city after city has been improved significantly. We recently ran a study where we compared Uber to other available options in LA and New York and found that in many poorer and more peripheral neighborhoods, there really aren't any other options. It can take over an hour to get the second best option, whereas Uber is available in less than 5 minutes. So this gets back to a point that I made earlier, which is that one of the subtle effects of using smartphone technology to arrange rides is that you can request a ride from a side street, and the app knows exactly where you are. These are taxi pickups in New York, and in New York, taxis only pick up street hails, so they have to be able to see the person that they're picking up. Let's compare that to Uber pickups. So this is the same number of pickups for taxis and for Uber. And the pattern is unmistakable that there's very little extra pickup on main streets in Brooklyn. And what this means is that we have fewer vehicles stopping to pick people up on main streets. Main streets are typically the most congested streets in the city. If we can move pickups to more convenient places, because it's not convenient to be picked up on a congested street, then we can have a real impact on urban congestion even without changing the number of trips that take place. This map shows the Hackney neighborhood of London, which has been traditionally quite difficult to reach. In 2013, we did a small number of trips. Each of these blue lines is a trip that originated in Hackney. Now let's look at what this looks like 2 years later, in January 2015. Now you can barely see Hackney in this map. This is what happens when the service grows over time. In particular, the benefits accrue to areas like Hackney, which are inaccessible to what we would call public transit, like subways and buses, and alternative for higher modes. Another interesting benefit from Uber, and this is actually a local example, this is a Bogota map, is that it works everywhere. So we can actually see travelers take Uber to the airport in one country, get on an airplane, and arrive 8 hours later and take another Uber trip. I've been told that millions of people visit Bogota on an annual basis from other countries. And I can tell you from personal experience that arriving in a foreign nation in which you do not speak the main language there, it's very difficult to know what to do as a first step. With Uber, you automatically know how to get exactly where you want to go. So that's yet another example of the way in which it coalesces information and makes it useful. So we expect that the ease of travel locally will encourage lots of international and interstate travel, because transportation for foreigners has essentially been solved if they automatically know how to use the transportation system. So now I'd like to discuss a few more local examples of how Uber is impacting mobility, and I'll focus on Bogota, which is one of our earliest international cities. And internally at Uber headquarters, I can tell you it's one of the cities that we're most excited about. It's one of the cities that people throughout the company talk about the most, because it's grown quickly, people love the product, and people engage with the product in a variety of really interesting ways. So this map shows the areas in blue which are readily accessible via the Transmilenio. So each circle is a half kilometer around each station. As you can see, there's an awful lot of black, which we refer to in this slide as transportation desert. These are areas that you cannot get to easily using only the Transmilenio. So Uber offers an alternative, and which I'll argue is a complement to the Transmilenio. It enables people to get places that the Transmilenio does not service well. So I'm far from an expert on Bogota, but I've been told that the neighborhoods that you see in this map, mostly in the upper right here, are typically difficult to get to via Transmilenio, and yet have a lot of economic activity in them. And as you can see, if you can see the little arrows in this diagram, the Uber users in Bogota are predominantly using Uber to get from other neighborhoods to a neighborhood that does not have good public transit access. Uber is available at a high rate wherever you are. So what that means is that our CEO's favorite description of this is that Uber's transportation is as available as running water. And what that means is when you take the app out, you should expect to be able to push the button and get a car reliably and in a short amount of time. So this shows you that in most of the neighborhoods in Bogota, when you hit the request button, a car will show up soon. And we've seen this throughout the world. For example, in San Francisco, in every single neighborhood in the city, your you have a 95% chance or higher of getting a car the first time you hit the button, and in all likelihood it'll be there in less than 3 minutes. So getting back to my transmillennial talk, one of the things that we're most excited about, that we've seen in Bogota and in many other cities with public transit, is that Uber can support a mixed mode of transit. And so an example of that would be, take somebody who lives near a Transmilenio station but works not very close to one. So they can take the Transmilenio most of the way, get off at the nearest stop, and then request an Uber to complete what we call the last mile. So that's one way that somebody who might have had to own a car otherwise could sell their car and adopt a mixed use mode. So we've diagrammed that in this picture here. Each of these trips in blue started near a station and ended far away from a station. There's a second way in which we expect this mixed modality idea to complement public transportation, and that's what I'll discuss sort of as in closing with a description of our future plans. So Uber Pool is a product that we've developed, that we've experimented with in a variety of our older cities, so San Francisco, New York, for example, that we're very excited to be bringing to additional cities in the future. While UberX is the first step towards shared mobility, as lots of people have indicated to us that with UberX they're interested in selling their car and adopting a mixed mode lifestyle. We think that Uber Pool is the future, and it'll enable true ride sharing and true mixed mode transportation. So let me describe what Uber Pool is. So traditionally when you use Uber, you request a car, but you don't necessarily need to tell the app where you're going, you can just tell the driver. With Uber Pool, we ask, where are you going? And we ask lots of people that. And then if two people happen to be going along the same path, which is quite common, then we'll put them in the same car. So in New York, an MIT study suggested that 95% of taxi trips could be pooled in this way. So basically every trip in a dense city. And New York does not have, from what I understand, as many taxi trips as Bogota or many other cities. The potential for this technology is astonishing. When you share rides, the driver is being paid a higher percentage of the time. The riders can split the price, and there are fewer cars on the road. And as a result, the city may become less congested, or the public transit system may become less congested. We're essentially taking the road and increasing its throughput. So let me show you a little toy example of how this works. We have two people who don't know each other, but are both Uber users, and they're both going to bars that are near each other. So they both request a ride from Uber, and they tell Uber where they're going. Uber takes that information and processes it very, very quickly, which is a technical feat, and figures out that these two people are going along a similar path. So let's allocate them this driver who's nearby. So the driver comes, and Uber suggests the order in which the pickup occurs. So the driver goes to the closest rider, picks them up, then they pick up the second rider. They make the first drop-off, and then they make the last drop-off. We have this idea as well of an infinitely or continuous ride from a driver's perspective. You pick one person up, you pick another person up, you drop one off, you pick another one up, you drop that second one off. You keep doing that, and you're essentially always working, always earning, until you decide that you're done for the day. So again, referencing our survey of our users, 80% of Uber riders in Bogota own at least one car. The most interesting stat here, 43% would consider giving up their car because of reliable options like Uber. Now this is just in the context of existing Uber, UberX. So if you imagine that almost all rides are in principle poolable because there's so many rides in cities like Bogota, you could have the price of a ride. And UberX is quite cheap already. You could have the price. So this 43% could become much larger. The mixed modality future will be real. This picture sort of emphasizes the congestion reducing possibilities that come attendant with mixed modalities. So people who decide to sell their car and rely on Transmilenio, Uberpool, and other options are contributing a social good as well as a private good. When they pool together, as you can see going from the top to the bottom here, the number of rides can be the same with far fewer cars. In this example, the number of cars on the road goes from 18 to 10. With higher capacity cars, you could see an even greater reduction. We're taking the existing road surface and potentially doubling or even more than doubling its throughput without building a single extra street. The only way this is going to be possible, of course, is by scaling the system. So as trip volumes go up, the Uber pool match rate goes up. We've seen this in practice, and it's also true in theory. The more trips you have, the more similar trips you have, the more trips you can pool. So Uber pool requires the kind of massive growth that we've seen in Uber cities across the world, and we're excited to see in places like Bogota as well. So in closing the Uber pool concept, I'll show you another map. This is a map, unlike the other one, but this is a map of parking spaces in San Francisco. A huge percentage of one of the most expensive cities in the world is dedicated to storing unused cars. So Americans, and this is probably true of most car owners, drive their car 5% of the time. So 95% of the time, their car is sitting unused, taking up valuable space. The beauty of a mixed modal life is that a smaller number of cars can service the transportation needs of the population. So it doesn't just reduce congestion. It has benefits that we can barely even begin to imagine. If you reduced the number of parking spaces in San Francisco from millions to zero, it's hard to imagine all the ways in which that could be made beneficial to the city. So that I would like to close then with a video that Uber designed for the first anniversary of the Uber pool experiment in San Francisco, so that you can see visually what I've been talking about. Thank you very much.